What's up?
Hey, what's going on, Joe?
Not too much. How's your week going?
It's going well. It's beautiful. It's summer. People are going outside. It's great.
It is a nice thing. Cool. Well, thanks for thanks for doing the Let's Talk Data Engineering. It seems like we do these every couple of weeks now, so it's always good to chat about data engineering. So for the audience out there, if you have any questions for Ben and I, hit us up. Otherwise, you'll just get to hear us talk for an hour. So what's been on your mind lately with data engineering?
I think the big thing recently, like we keep discussing, I think the whole concept of like data engineering will it become like the new thing and things like that. And like part of me keeps like fighting back and forth between like, yes, it will and no, it won't. And part of me is, I think, realizing part of it is perception, right? Like, and part of it's going to be up to the people to like, like people like us to like make it a thing, right? Like, it's just like, well, I mean, if the people doing it don't have confidence like in its coolness factor, then who will? So yeah, I mean, like, I think it's like, I like doing it.
Right.
I think I'm just always like wary. It's like, well, will other people like doing it? So
interesting. And walk me through that. What do you think what do you think people would like about data engineering? And what do you think would maybe stop people from wanting to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I think, there's a lot in terms of like data engineering where, it's just, it's got a lot of similarities. I think, especially if you're more like working in that software engineering, data engineering role where you're trying to solve a lot of big problems. You're trying to deal with all of the big data issues that often come up, like dealing with like, are you dealing with streaming systems? Are you dealing with like, various optimizations and tinkering? So I think for people who like to tinker and try to optimize systems, I think that works great. I think for people who like automating things and like automating processes, I think data engineers tend to do that a lot more because a lot of our focus is automation and like workflows. Whereas I think a lot more, it feels like software engineers tend to build applications more so. So I think that's another kind of area that some data engineers or people who might be kind of curious about data engineering might find it interesting. I also think people who like maybe think they like data science but are more inclined to like engineering might also kind of fall into another camp where it's like, like data science might bring you to the area of data, but like you'll eventually maybe figure out that you're like, oh, but I actually like, engineering. I like the aspect of like building things and not just like doing analytics.
Yeah, it's a progression for sure. And I would encourage people who are confused, just maybe talk to people in the field, try and find, what might make sense. Try out projects too, right? Which is an interesting thing, because I think data science projects are a bit different than data engineering projects. They're sort of similar, sort of not similar. We can get to that in a second, but yeah, I would say, there's the door's wide open. I get messages all the time, like, should I become a data engineer first and then a data scientist? And I'm like, well, I think it depends on your career goals. It's kind of weird that you would be really good at both unless you happen to do both accidentally as a full-time job and then segued in. But the progression of doing one into the other, I think, is a bit. I don't know. Personally, I don't recommend that. I would say pick one. But that's again, this is like, I've been asked this question several times, which is why I bring it up. So
yeah, I think most people again kind of get brought to like data through like data science, right? And then I think like you I think on your LinkedIn have the whole recovering data scientist, but now data engineer, right? Like I don't know if you still have that, but
yeah, I do.
But yeah, so I think that's actually pretty common, where a lot of people like you come to data because you like data science, or maybe that's like you were like a data analyst and kind of went into data science or something like that. And then through time, you're like, yeah, but I actually like this, engineering component of data more than I like the data science side of it. So I think that's kind of some natural progression that a lot of people take. Mostly because like honestly, like I was like, it's interesting. So like this week, I've been working on a project with someone else, and they have more of a data science background. So like when I was kind of reviewing their stuff, I was like, oh, you've done this like a data scientist would. You've like kind of done you've like pulled all the data into the Jupyter notebook and done the analysis. But I was like, in my brain, I was like, no, you're going to put it into a table, and then you're going to like, clean up and do certain steps in case like, in my mindset, right? Data engineering, you kind of like build these tables for people to use in the future. You don't just build it for this one analysis. So it's just that interesting kind of differentiation.
It is a differentiation, and you sometimes have to hold your tongue and say, instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, you're doing it wrong," just say, "Well, yeah, it's cool." I mean, because there's a lot of ways to do stuff, right? I think data engineers approach things from one angle for sure, and it's the engineering mindset. And then you approach things, if you're a data scientist, you just need to answer your question, or an analyst, right? They'll typically care about longevity of production systems. So, yeah. Actually, on a related note, we have a question. Stanley Lee asks, curious about interactions between data engineering and data science. When and how do data engineers come into a data science EDA initiative? You want to take this one?
Sure. I can try to do my best. I think just like, well, it's like, I imagine it really depends, right? But like, if you're like purely looking at like EDA, right? Like we were just saying, like a data scientist might just be like going out there, pulling a bunch of data from tons of different sources, some of which the DE might need to pull in, some of which the data scientist might just be pulling in from public data sources. Again, not really caring about making it a final product table, just kind of curious. Maybe they're pulling it in from the data lake, and the data engineers are all busy, so they're just pulling it in from the data lake and kind of trying to see if there's any value in there. So I think there's a couple different ways it could come in with the data engineer. One, the data scientist already knows the data is valuable and wants to bring it into a table. And so then the DE kind of comes into play. Or two, the data scientist has kind of done some EDA and is figuring out, hey, this data would be great in a table. There's more use for it besides just my use case. We should productionize this whole workflow or something. And that's another way a DE can kind of come in from there. So I think there's kind of those two places, right? Like you already know the data is useful. And so you want the DE to come in and bring it in so you're not having to run this Jupyter notebook every day and it's optimized. Or two, you've figured out that it's useful, or you're trying to figure out that it's useful. And once you've done that, then you can kind of bring in the data engineer post EDA. So there's kind of one on both sides, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. And Matt and I actually did a video on this on Monday for the Monday morning data chat. We talked about kind of the communication between data engineers and data scientists. I think some of the things we hit on is try and stay as tightly coupled as possible if you can. So if you're doing sprints, for example, if a company does sprints, data engineers and data scientists should ideally at least be aware of each other's work. And in lockstep. Things where I've seen things go awry is when data engineers and data analysts or data scientists sort of go off into left field. This happens more often than I think is great. So, and I think data engineers in general should just have a really good understanding of data science. That might be an exception in my thinking here, but I think if you don't understand even the basics of what a data scientist does, whether that's analytics or machine learning, you're really doing yourself a disfavor as a data engineer. You probably won't be as performant as maybe you could be. So when it comes to EDA, though, I would think the data engineer would just set the data scientist up for success. So the data scientist can just do EDA to their heart's content and not be bottlenecked by the data engineer. So I think maybe the role of a data engineer too is to remove bottlenecks and make it so the data scientists can just do their job. There's the old tome about how data scientists spend like 80-90% of their time cleaning data, prepping data, finding data, all this stuff. I mean, ideally, a data engineer should help reduce that that percentage so data scientists can spend 90% of their time doing the stuff that they should be doing, which is analysis and machine learning. So, yeah.
I think I like the idea of like they're removing bottlenecks. It's kind of more of a generalized statement, on, like kind of taking both sides. Like they can remove bottlenecks from either side. Of the data pipeline or the EDA pipeline, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I got a question here. Wafa Barakat, I think that's how you pronounce your name. Apologies if I totally butchered it. Studying data analytics in looking to enter the industry, what are some tips? I assume, how would you read this question? Does it seem like this person's looking to get into analytics or into data engineering?
I mean, I assume there's some generalization there because I mean, in both cases, right? Like you've got some similar solutions, so to speak, right? Like obviously, like I always tell people, first try to get an internship if you can, right? Like that's always what I tell people. Like if you're still in school and you can get that internship, that will always make your life easier. If you're already past school, then you've kind of got to go onto like projects and showing work, because that's the best way you've got, I think, afterwards. So yeah, I mean, I'm always big into projects, and whether that's projects at work or projects that you do by yourself. I think it's always kind of interesting. It's a lot easier to kind of, I think, put together pieces of content, whether that be, again, blogs, websites these days, than it's really ever been. So it's like, that's always a great way to kind of show off your work and as you're getting ready for industry. I think that's more like getting a job, I guess. This is a pretty broad question now that I think about it. Like,
that's a lot to
looking at the industry, I guess, like, what's the goal? Like, it's like, are you looking for what skills you want to pick up? Are you looking for getting a job, or there's a couple of different steps in this pipeline, I guess.
Simplest thing, just put data analyst or data science in your title and just like get a job. I'm just totally joking on that. Some people do this. No, yeah, it's a broad question, but yeah, I mean, I'll take a stab at this too. Projects, visibility. Your biggest enemy when you're coming out is just obscurity. Basically, people need to know who you are, and you're up against, especially with beginners in the field. I hate to use the word beginner, people early in the careers in analytics or data in general right now. I would say data engineering might be somewhat an exception, but data science, there is a glut of new entrants, right? So you got to make yourself stand out. Content's great, blog posts, videos, projects, make yourself visible early and often. Learn the fundamentals, obviously, which you'll learn anyway, I would hope, depending where you go. But yeah, broad question, so broad answer. Thanks for the question. Daniel Beach asks, do you find a lot of data engineers come from a classic CS degree field or from somewhere else? You want to take this one?
I mean, it's pretty broad, right? Like I've met people in the data engineering space that are, English majors, or, it ranges all over. It's usually experience, right, that differentiates people. Oftentimes, like some people were like, maybe they were one major, like maybe they were like a physics major in college, but they also loved, setting up Linux and like doing server work and doing all this other kind of stuff that like set them up for success in terms of programming. I think nowadays maybe it's a little more common that people like have that like CS background or IS background, because it's more of a clear path. I feel like maybe in the past it wasn't as clear that like, if I get a CS degree or an information systems degree, it's like an easy way to become like a data engineer or a data scientist or something similar to that, or at least get into the right space that I can eventually move to it. So I think now it's a little more common. I don't necessarily think you need a strict CS degree, because the one hard thing with CS degrees is like the first like 3 or 4 classes I feel like are very helpful, right? Like your basics in terms of programming, your data structures, algorithms, those like first like 4 some classes. But then after that, it's a lot of stuff that's like very specific, like sometimes like hardware or something like that like, are you going to use that? Or something. And so I'd love to see like more like big data classes or something like that, where they're trying to like deal with these like certain kinds of problems that are very unique to business, really. Right. Like they're very difficult to duplicate on a small scale. So it'd be interesting to see if like schools in the future start like setting up like giant sets of data that kids can start learning on to develop on.
I've been doing that for my class over at the University of Utah. I teach in the IS program, and we use BigQuery for the class. It's advanced SQL for analytics, and the reason is BigQuery offers a lot of expressiveness in how it you can query it, but it also has large data sets, public data sets, so like many terabytes. So that's. Do
you look at like the Stack Overflow or GitHub data sets?
Yeah, GitHub's one of our assignments actually. Yeah. Unnesting data.
Yeah. Nice, yeah. And I think those 2 data sets. I think I went over that. Like I did that video, like the last advanced SQL tutorial you ever need. And it was kind of a joke, sort of serious, kind of a joke, but just going over like, stop looking at these tutorials and just go look at basically, I just said, go look at BigQuery and start writing some questions down and start trying to like write some queries for yourself.
That's a big one.
It's like when I think about like when I was coming up, which wasn't even that long ago, I don't think there was as many data sets. Like I think I remember like, some data sets started to come out. I think Kaggle just originally started to like come out with some of their data sets. But now it's just so easy just to go again to BigQuery, run some stuff. You don't have to even load it to it. You don't have to make fake data sets. You can just have these pre-made relational data sets. Cause like, I think even in like, all those data science competitions usually had like one kind of data set or something. It was just like one basically CSV. Here it's like, oh no, here's like, a full set of relational stuff. It's got open text, right? If you're doing Stack Overflow or GitHub, you can do all sorts of interesting kind of analysis. There's this one guy, I think it's like Felipe Hoffa, that does a ton of different, a ton of different Medium articles that are just like, they're really like, he will answer like one question and make it see like really go into it. And it's really cool how it's like, you can really drill into this like concept beyond just, this initial question. Like what language is most likely to be answered, or what language answers quickest or something like that. I think is one of his articles in terms of like Stack Overflow.
Speaking of Felipe, he recently went to Snowflake, and Chris Tabb, what's up, Chris? Says Snowflake provides loads of free data sets as well. That's definitely true, and $400 in free credits. So check out Snowflake as well. I know at the time we were doing our class, they had a time limit in terms of how long you could have your environment up. So it's like 3
Sure.
weeks. So it's like not going to do a class. But yeah, if you want to learn, I would say modern data warehouses and SQL, Snowflake's great. BigQuery's great. I would start with those two. Both cost effective, query as you go kind of things. I wouldn't spend up Redshift yet. Maybe Athena, but I don't know what the public data sets are. But between Snowflake and BigQuery,
you got enough to keep you busy.
Got a lot. But I'd say back to this question. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh no, I was just going to say that goes back to the industry question, where it's like, yeah, if you need some examples or some ways to get some projects, there you go. Just go to BigQuery, write a few articles. People will notice eventually.
But I would say in terms of like classic CS degree, I tend to agree. Like the first few classes I think are useful for a data engineer. The thing is, data engineering is still really young, right? So it hasn't consolidated in terms of even what this field actually is.
Yeah.
I know you're taking a stab at it with your content. Andreas Kretz is taking a stab at it with his courses and content, and I'm taking a stab at it with the book I'm writing. And it's all, I can guarantee you none of us are going to come to like a convergence in terms of specifically what it means. And if you look on Google, do a Google search for the exact keyword of what is data engineering. I think last time I checked, there's 87,000 unique results. So
that's almost funny because I bet there's more for what
it might be more.
Scientist.
Yeah.
No. I mean, what is a data scientist?
Yeah.
Like,
so this is a pretty young field, and I think the whole point is there isn't one path into it right now. I would say a CS degree sets you up for success. I always make the joke that like software engineers, it's kind of like wrestling in MMA. Like it's a really good foundation.
Yeah.
Like software engineering skills are a really good foundation for data engineering. But that said, data engineering is also becoming very abstracted. Like Snowflake is a very abstract tool. Yeah. You basically just need to know how to do, Chris Tabb's right. Like it evolved from the ETL rule. It's exactly it. Like back in the day, I think you had to do a lot more low level engineering. It's changing a lot. If you're using Snowflake or BigQuery, what do you have to manage in BigQuery?
Yeah. No. I mean, it's changing a lot. Well, I mean, like you obviously still need to deal with often some of the pipelining, but other than that, like there's a lot of performance that comes out of these tools just out of the box, right? Like, yes, there's some things you can do with like clustering keys and things of that nature, but they're like, I remember like if you put too much data, like not even that much data in like Postgres database, you're gonna have to add a key very quickly. Like it's not just gonna naturally query very well, and then so
it's gonna suck.
it's gonna be terrible.
So I would say know about like hotspotting though, like when you're how you load your data in is good. So learning the fundamentals, like I help a lot of clients out with Snowflake. We're Snowflake partner, Google partners with everyone actually, and so we do a lot of work with Snowflake, for example. But I see the thing where people get messed up in Snowflake is not understanding how clustering works and how micropartitions work. So like if you're going to be a data engineer, at least understand how the tool works at a fundamental level. Yeah. Same with BigQuery. You got to understand how slots work and how it allocates data in classes, because like there's a lot of stuff to know. But I would say the classic CS degree, like it helps. Like I love people who can program production grade code. I just think increasingly it's going to be you're writing production grade code for things that are a competitive advantage. If you're trying to like pipe data from A to B, unless there's a very specific thing that you have to do that can be solved with a lot of plug and play tools, whether open source or third party SaaS. So
and I think that's why like a lot of people are even coming to the conclusion like it's almost like we're almost watching data engineering like kind of evolve in itself again to more of like the solution architect kind of level, where it's like you just or analytics engineer or whatever you want to like call the news. So many terms, right? Like, but more of where you're like again looking at the entire pipeline and not just again one component. Where like it used to be like, oh, you're only dealing with this very small aspect of it. Now it's like, well, hopefully you can handle all of it because we need you to, right? We don't want to have to pay for 4 people to do this one dashboard essentially. Yeah,
Chris is like, back in the good old days. I remember designing partitions for these Oracle bitmap index. Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know. I mean, if you need to know this, great. If you don't, like do something more interesting, I suppose. So unless you find this interesting, not making a knock.
Oh yeah, I mean, like there's always gonna be value to knowing and understanding that kind of stuff in terms of like as things go in the future, you're gonna be, maybe you're designing the software that's now gonna replace, not to say it's gonna replace Snowflake, but tries to replace Snowflake, and you might have to pull from a lot of these old technologies to try to figure out new ways to repurpose them based on like modern things.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I was actually I was talking to the guy one of the guys who wrote Hive last week. Yeah, and he's telling me about how he's redoing he's coming up with a new architecture, and he's reviewing a lot of papers from like the 90s, from Microsoft Research and stuff. And I'm doing the same with my book. I'm actually going back to very old school stuff, data management, data governance, enterprise-y stuff. So I'm like, this is actually, I think it's back to the future. Like data engineering is actually going towards data management, data architecture, like you say, governance, all the higher level stuff. Now the lower level engineering is largely taken care of. I wouldn't say taken care of, but it's addressed by a lot of great companies and players. It's like, now you can start adding more value up the chain instead of just, writing Hadoop code, which I've done enough of that, like looking to do something else. So cool. Lauren, what's up, Lauren? Wait to Lauren. What is the best methodology for appending table names?
Is this I'm curious if this is something that we were talking about earlier. No, you just name it underscore good ones, or the good one, or final copy. I don't know if that's the joke that's going here.
Oh, that's funny. So cool. I don't know. To take a serious stab at this, do you want to try and do that, or is this like more of an inside joke?
I'm not sure. Oh man, but no. Okay. So I'm trying to think. It's like, do I have a serious way of answering this?
Use lots of dots, like lots of underscores, so people get really confused and don't know how many there are. Name them your name. I'm just joking. Cool. Other questions out in the audience? Otherwise, yeah, I'm going to kind of harken back to something that Chris Tabb was talking about, though, which is kind of enterprisey stuff like this. I mean, what are your thoughts, though? Yeah, V6, V infinity.
Final copy. I promise this time.
What are your thoughts on the trajectory of data engineering, though?
Yeah, no, I keep wondering that, right? Because I'm like, I think we both probably have this thing happen because we put out content, right? Like, so thus, you have other companies reach out to you and they're all trying to sell something or come up with a new solution. So I'm always curious, like, okay, so is one of these things going to replace it? Is one of these things, going to replace data engineering? Like, what role does that leave for people? I mean, like, there's always this role. I think that's the interesting thing. In fact, I had someone ask me that question. Like, they were like, oh, we need to add a custom connector to some sort of basically ELT tool. And I was like, oh, we could probably just use this other ELT tool instead. And they're like, oh, well, then why do we need you? I'm like, well, you had to ask that question. So for starters, you didn't know it existed. So that's answer one. But it is interesting. Like, I think I'm still seeing people who will like often use these tools in a weird way, to say like the wrong way sometimes. Like maybe they're like still doing a lot of the process manually just to get it to the point where it gets automated. So I think that's always interesting. I think there's still always benefits. I'm just curious to see, like, will people go full code or keep coding, or will people go full, SaaS solutions? Because I'm still seeing plenty of people have like cron job written ELT, ETL type jobs. So it's like, sometimes it feels like we're so far away. Like maybe it's like data science, where it's like, sometimes it feels like you're so far away from actually getting to the thing you want to do. Like, even though we have all these tools that are supposed to help make it super easy, so. Yeah,
that's an interesting one. And Chris is a good point. And thanks for the contributions, Chris. It's fun chat. I feel like we have a third party here. We can invite you onto the show if you want.
Yeah.
Actually, in all seriousness, hit me up. Message me if you want to join the chat. It'll fragment. You'll be a source DevOps. Yeah, I think that it'll be this and more stuff. But yeah, it'll fragment. I think it'll still be under the umbrella of data engineering. But then again, maybe not, because I feel like data science, I think, has a risk of, maybe, I wouldn't say a risk, but an opportunity to fragment the title back into probably more specific titles. Remains to be seen. I know I try and cover this, in the book I'm writing too. It's like the future is uncertain. So
it's going to depend on how companies adopt things, and that's what I'm still kind of trying to figure out. Because again, I'm just seeing so many different ways companies are trying to use tools that it's like there isn't one clear path right now. I'm finding it's just like there's so many people are trying so many different ways. Even within one company, right? Like they might have like 3 or 4 different solutions that they're using, right? Like some team might be using Python and cron, some team might be using, Fivetran, some team might be using some other tool. And so it's just like this lack of centralized process makes it hard for me to say like, okay, well, what's winning? Everyone's just doing what they know and what they're comfortable with. It feels like most of the time.
It is. So. It's a path of least resistance. I mean, you're going to do something more than the effort that's required. I mean, it's human nature. And so people are busy, right? You're trying to do whatever job you're assigned to do. And it's hard to keep up, though. Yeah. There's a lot of tools. If you look at the data tools from like 2012, which was like there were a lot, and you look at now, I think the first mark had or first round capital, whatever, had a LumaScape of like 2020 data tools, and it was intentionally, you couldn't read it. It was so small that it's like, I think that was the whole point. It's like there's so many options that you don't even know where to begin. But yeah, and that's where I'm kind of thinking it comes down to like knowing how to manage a life cycle and understanding kind of the bigger picture stuff. So you know how to tie in tools, whatever they are, whether you're doing with ingestion, storage, transformations, serving data, whatever. I think that's going to become more of the sort of thought process of a data engineer, so to speak. So, and DBTs, making sure, massive traction's an understatement.
No, yeah. Again, it's just like, it's one of those things that like, I think it'll just kind of naturally happen. And then one day, well, I don't even know. Again, like there are tools that are naturally like taking hold. Like again, Snowflake's kind of gotten this natural hold, as well as like kind of BigQuery. Like I do hear some Redshift, but I feel like I almost hear like BigQuery more than I hear Redshift sometimes, which is weird, because it's like, well, Redshift was arguably, part of AWS, which was one of the more earlier kind of cloud systems. But like, I feel like somehow I like in my anecdotal mind, I think of BigQuery more than I think of Redshift. So like, that's one of those things where it's like, why do I think more of BigQuery and Snowflake and less of, Redshift and Synapse Analytics by Azure? I don't know. It's just that's kind of the current split that I personally feel. Is it because of content marketing? Is it because of, what I'm experiencing on the day-to-day and working with? So
feel the same way. I mean, we work with all these companies, and it's like, it's Snowflake and BigQuery all day. Starting to see some questions about Firebolt. That's a big one coming up. Yeah. Upsolver's another one. I think it's, new data lake. AWS, it's Redshift's a good one. I've done a lot of production Redshift, but I was with a client yesterday actually talking to him, and it was Redshift or Snowflake, and they wanted Snowflake. I think it was just because the mindshare thing, right? So
yeah, I mean, like Snowflake, like I remember, I think it was like almost 5 years ago where I was sitting, like I thought it was like a conference, and then I eventually realized it was a Snowflake like sales meeting. I was like,
they did good sales meetings.
They have been doing sales so well for so, because like they made it almost felt like a actual tech talk, and then at the end you're like, oh no, this is actually selling Snowflake. Oh, good one. No, I mean, like if you can do that with anything, right? Like I think that's what a lot of good engineering teams do in terms of like trying to attract talent. Like they create great blogs. Like I've been reading like Airbnb's blog recently, and I'm like, man, they do some cool engineering over there. Like that's right. Like it's these things that like, it's both salesy, but also in a weird way provides this interesting value. So
it's the way of the future or it's the way of the present for marketing too. It's just community management and developer advocacy. Like, and you don't even know it's marketing. You just feel like you're part of the thing, right? You wake up, and you're like, God, I was being sold to this whole time. I didn't even know it. It's like the old saying, if the last one to figure out a poker game, if you're the patsy, I guess you're the patsy. So something. And it always happens to me too. So, but it's the way it is. I mean, it's like, I think the old aggressive, like enterprisey sales stuff like that may still work, but I think a lot of people they caught onto it and they're just tired of it. So you want to feel like you're part of a community and part of something a movement. That's what I think DBT has done really well.
Yeah.
They created a great community around a tool and got a lot of traction. The Slack group is out of control. I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome to see that.
Yeah.
And same with other tools, Airbyte, that's one I was checking out the other day. They're going to be something. So
yeah, no, I mean, I was talking to both of the co-founders like not too long ago, and that's like their whole focus, right? Has been like the community, not their whole focus, but like a big portion of it is like growing that community and not just, again, the product itself, because by having a good community, especially since they're open source, they're going to have a great product, right? Regardless of kind of where it pivots. It's kind of like, as long as you're hiring really good engineers, more likely, even if you need to pivot your product, you're likely going to be successful in what you pivot into. So the more you can get, the more strength you can get behind that, the more likelihood of success.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the content for a bit. I mean, you pump out a lot of content, and it's a lot of good content. How do you keep going on this, and like, how do you come up with ideas?
I have more ideas than I care to like. I can't even keep up with it. Like I'm just constantly like, oh, I have this idea, and I'm constantly like having to like prioritize what makes the most sense. And I don't know. There's just a lot of things that you're like thinking about a problem. I think part of it's that, like, by doing tons of work and consulting and all these various things, you like think of new ideas. You're like, oh, this would be a great thing for a piece of work or a piece of content. I was telling you before the show, like, I was like, oh, I really want to do a piece of content where I like show people how to build a data engineering product that maybe could make money, even if it's like $200 like a month or something, and it costs me $300 in AWS or GCP. Like, I'm just like, yeah, it'd still be cool just to do, because I think a lot of people don't realize that like data engineering can build tons of products that can make money. And I think a lot of people only look at it as this like back end component, but like, if you can figure your data correctly, put some sort of UI on the front, there are tools and solutions and companies that are essentially just data engineering companies that either scrape information offline or get public data or standardize a bunch of like maybe company data and then sell back some sort of analytical tool. And really all that is at the end of the day is like some sort of data engineering layer and then some sort of either dashboard. And, I know plenty of companies that are successful just doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of project ideas, but I think you hit on something interesting though, which is that visible like money making ideas might be something interesting for people. Like when Matt and I talked about projects, it's kind of like your plumbing project. Like it's largely hidden, and it's hard to describe, right? Like, oh, I made this Kafka pipeline, but it's like, okay, can I see it? Well, not really, because it's in an environment that's locked down. But maybe you could do a video or something too, right, and show people. But yeah, it's tricky, but I like this idea of like kind of tangible output that makes you money. It's like passive income or something like.
Yeah, even if it's like passive loss income, like I'm just because like if you can make some money off of it, you can scale it and eventually figure out how to actually make it something more. And it doesn't even have to be a lot. I think it's just more about giving people that like inspiration. So I think that's like part of it, right? Like content's interesting. It's always kind of fun to play around with like what. In a world where there is so much content, it's like the game is less about the content and more about figuring out how to get traction and how to get noticed. I was talking to someone actually this morning who also does content, and they were like, oh yeah, like, because like with YouTube, they're like, I break it down like this way. They're like, each kind of thing is a different thing. Like, okay, the thumbnail plays a role, the video plays a role, the first 30 seconds plays a role. And I mean, maybe you've seen that with my videos where I'm like trying to figure out, okay, how do I do the first 30 seconds of my video? Because right, like that's kind of huge in terms of keeping people engaged with your content. And then also like, I always think about, okay, like how do I now, if I can get past the first 30 seconds, now how do I make sure I get past probably the next check mark? I imagine most people is like the first 2 minutes, maybe. Okay, do I need to do something every 2 minutes that's like a funny joke that like is a breakaway from what I'm doing? Like, how do I keep people like engaged in the content beyond just the main content? Because it's a competition there too, right? Like attention is its own kind of currency, and it's always interesting trying to keep people's attention and playing that game.
Yeah, I know you've been doing a really good job with your intros too. Kind of doing it the YouTube way.
Trying.
Right. So yeah, it's tricky. It's something I could do a better job on, frankly, because it's just, if you look at the drop off in your analytics, it's like, after a certain point, people are just out.
People gone.
There's a lot of other content. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So
it's awesome. And you're also doing more of the interview style, which is much harder to do in terms of like, I think it's a harder piece of interviewing unless you like already are like a big YouTuber and then are doing some sort of like podcast or are a big star of some kind. Like, why is someone tuning into you versus, I don't know, Logan Paul?
Exactly, right. And so and Joe Rogan and everybody else. So I mean, I try and keep the interviews conversational and stuff, and it definitely gets good traction. But yeah, it's not like a quick tip type videos where it's jumpy and everyone's So it's as much like content, I think, as it is like coming up with a good editing piece as well for YouTube. But you got to do it the YouTube way and so forth. But yeah, I mean, content's a good one, and I think I like what you're doing. So it's awesome.
No, it's been good.
Yeah, that's cool. Any other questions in the audience?
It's gotten all quiet. It's a quiet Friday. Everyone's probably ready for the weekend. It's starting to be summer.
Chris Tabb says he's trying to join here, so
give
him a couple minutes and let him on. So
yeah,
met him last night in one of my friends' chat threads. So he's got good questions, and he's basically doing the conversations. Let's have him on. So but yeah, that's cool. Any other thoughts on data engineering or data in general you've been thinking of? I mean,
oh man, such a broad question.
I would say the interesting one that we come up, I find a lot is like, how do I get into this field? There's and there's always tons of variations on this question, right? But I think it's one of these where it's something I always think about. If you're to start over, would there be anything different about your journey into data engineering?
Well, I think if I'd start over, it might be easier. In some ways, it might be easier. I should say, in some ways, it might be easier now than it was back then. I feel like before, it's like in order to get into data engineering, you already had to have been working either in some sort of CS capacity or some sort of like I feel like you have to kind of like work your way up like a few years in the industry before you can even realize data engineering is almost a thing, or like even some BI stuff is a thing, because it's not like that's something from school. That's something you kind of like, maybe you take an analytics job first, and then like as you're working as an analyst, you see this like BI developer or ETL developer, and you're like, wait, what is this ETL stuff? Because again, something you've never covered in school, right? Like I was an IS that's my background, information systems, and no one talked about ETLs. Like no one talked
Really?
about no one talked about ETLs like when I was in information systems. Yeah, it was weird. Like, and then I like to tell people, I didn't realize I was looking at a different type of like database for like 3 or 4 months working at my first job. Like I didn't realize like a data warehouse was like a different paradigm altogether. Cause like, right, like you got keys. Yeah, you got keys. You're like, okay, this is like, yeah, I know how to join a database. Like I was like, I think I was literally taking a database course at the same time as I had like my internship. So, for me, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, this makes sense. I never really clicked that it's like, wait, this is a totally different like design model. And then I think eventually it was like, oh yeah, no, this is completely different. And then that kind of spurred my whole journey.
These aren't the same.
Yeah, it's like, well, they feel the same, right? Because it's like, oh, I'm still using SQL Server. Okay, fine. Like it's just these names things are interesting. Fact, dimension. Okay. Key instead of ID. Okay, fine. Key instead of ID. That's, maybe just someone's, whatever. But yeah, so it was just one of those things where it's like you don't realize it until a little later, and you're like, oh, I've been staring at something completely different this entire time.
Right, but I think the danger is you might treat it differently too, like in the ways that you would insert data and do merges and all this other stuff. Treat it like a transactional database, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, there's that. There's like trying to join dimensions or facts to facts. You're like, oh, I can just join this table to this table, right? They got the same keys in it. I think I did that once or twice, but I was just like, yeah, they have the same keys in it. Why wouldn't they? You just got to find all the unique ones and then join, right? That's how that works. Which sometimes maybe you're lucky, but most of the time probably not. So yeah, no, I don't think I remember someone talking about like ETLs and like BI stuff when they went to their master's program. Like they're like, oh yeah, they're like teaching us all of this stuff. And I was like, oh, interesting. Well, I'm learning that at work right now. But I did not know that was a course. Yeah, I don't know if UW had that course. Maybe now they do. Again, now there's data science undergrad, so I wouldn't put it past people to like now have an undergrad or at least some undergrad courses that just like discuss that. Or maybe it was like an elective that I never saw, and it was like
right.
I don't know. Is yours more of elective? Or is it part of?
Yeah, mine's an elective in grad school, right? So I teach.
Okay, well there you go. Yeah, so it's
so yeah, and everyone get into like, is this going to be like SQL Server? And like, it's not that at all.
Yeah. so there you go. Yeah, it's like if you're
the students will learn. They take our class. I think they have to do like a data warehousing class or some other database theory class, but then they take ours, and it's like, but they also learn data warehousing on SQL Server.
Yeah,
like,
but that also sounds like it's part of your master's course, right?
Yeah, I mean, you want to.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'm trying to get people to more focus on kind of modern cloud data warehouses. Kind of like, I think it's good to do, a relational database for your data warehouse, but at the same time, I don't think it's appropriate in this day and age when you have things like Snowflake and BigQuery that are pennies on the dollar to nerd out on and get practices. So yeah, but that's my opinion. So.
Yeah, I think what would make the most sense, right, is to have some sort of like maybe one course that's like a little more like combination of design and like history, so you understand like, okay, this is like where we started, this is where we're going, and then doing more of like maybe kind of like your course where it's like this advanced analytics course where it's like, okay, based off that, here's like BigQuery, here's like how you can kind of structure different kind of steps like that. Again, it's like, it's one of those interesting things about college where it's like there's all these practical things that no one learned. And you're like, yeah, just have to wait till you're out of college to learn all the actual practical stuff. You just learn all this fun theory stuff. And then eventually realize there's so many different things you actually do at work. So
so much, and you only learn on the job. And the thing is, you learn on a job, but there's not really like a universal way of doing stuff either, which you'll find. I'm sure the way you learned, whether at your first job or at Facebook or wherever, it's kind of just
It's all different.
It's all different, and the needs of a FANG company are not the needs of a smaller company. That's just how it is. Like data engineering at a FANG is way different. So
yeah, no, I was just gonna say it's like it's way different. It's supported differently, right? Like I mean, like imagine having, you know, most companies. I don't know how many data engineers they have, but I imagine it's like what 30 maybe, right? Like you've got a small and no one's maybe no one's supporting the infrastructure, or maybe that 30 or 40 people are supporting the infrastructure and the actual pipelines themselves. Whereas, you know, if you go to these bigger engineering companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Netflix, they probably have like people that manage the infrastructure component of the things, and they're probably more software engineers. And then you got people that are just the data engineers, and then like so there's all these different layers of people all focus on making sure you get the data from one place to another. So that just leads to tons of different needs, as well as tons of different kind of solutions that work best. So yeah, it's like I said, some companies are using a combination of like Fivetran, some custom Python code here, some, you know, custom connectors over there.
Yep.
And it's why it's hard. I think it's why data engineering can be hard, because like it's so many different solutions to do the same thing.
There are, and that's why I was thinking. You know, the life cycle piece is very key, right? So if you can key in on the life cycle of data, and you know, that kind of thing, I think it's coming back to fundamentals, right? Because there's so many ways you can attack a problem, and there's too many tools. It's almost part of the problem. Is now, you know, I saw this thing. You know, I saw Chris. There was a who's in the chat here. There was a thread that my friend had, and it was this laundry list of data engineering tools. I wonder if I can find it actually, because it was kind of a hilarious thing. We can talk about this for a second. This one here. Let me share this tab real quick.
I'm curious.
Yeah,
but that is how it feels like. Like it's like you almost have to just pick to some degree.
So my buddy
I saw this one.
So it's like let me see. Comprehensive package for data engineering role in 2021. It's like, what the F? Okay, so if you're a data engineer, do you need to know, and Chris gave me a bunch of shit for not zooming in on this, which I will attempt to here.
Yeah, good luck.
But I think my whole point was there's so much going on here that I can't, or even if you could, it's just hard to wrap your head around this diagram. And I think that was my larger point. Is it? Oh, what's up? There's Chris right there. Chris, what's up, man? How you doing? Good. Just talking about the chart that brought us together. So
yeah, exactly. I was interested because obviously I saw the message last night, and when it just popped up. Tony's live. I thought, let's have a look. Let's see what's going on. And I've managed to work out how to use your this first time live ever for me. Done podcasts.
Welcome. Everyone, this is Chris Tabb. You want to introduce yourself to the audience here? You're live.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Chris Tabb. I'm a partner in another data and analytics company that Snowflake Partners. So I've known Greg a little while. I got into posting on LinkedIn about a year ago after one of Greg's posts about data types, and which resonated with me. Since then, kept in touch. I've learned that it's a great community, LinkedIn. So I've met some people, and now I've just randomly like gate crashed some live show. So
there you go. You know,
I've achieved everything now. I've actually gate crashed a live LinkedIn show. So I've made it now. I can retire now. But, I mean, Joe, awesome. Some of the stuff you've been talking about, it so resonates with me. And I talked about the ETL thing. So I've been in this industry a little while. I'm a little bit older. I started off in Cognos in the 90s doing OLAP reporting. At the time, it wasn't that big then, and we didn't have any big data definitely then anyway. And so through my career, but I fell into it basically. So I became an ETL developer, and up until recently, I saw this word data engineer, and you're thinking, well, what? And that list of things. That I think my comment was, that's a unicorn. If they exist anywhere, let's send them my way. I'd hire them. I'd hire them tomorrow. Yeah. So you can't, and companies do expect to have all of that. So the thing that I think that the 3 points I tease out of it is you need to have you need a good passion. Number one was passion. Next one was, a good understanding of problem solving and a good understanding of like SQL, relational modeling, logical models, understanding that. The rest of it, you can fall into any of those categories there. If you're more, code based, you fall into the DevOps part. If you're more data modeling, business focused, you fall more into the tail end of that data engineer role. And I mean, I've built lots of teams over the years, and I'm building up a consultancy team at the moment, and you're never going to find that one person that does all of them. But what you want to do is, it used to be T-shaped. Used to say, have like an understanding of everything, and then specialize in one area. What I like to use is pie shape now. And it's probably going to get into like I don't know, millipede shape. Also, you need a deeper understanding in a few. But having a team that you understand where they naturally fall into. So one that's more code based or anything like that, or maybe not business focused. Doesn't communicate as well. They fall naturally into that. The one that wants to understand what problem you're solving. You talk about facts and dimensions. I cut my teeth on on Kimball and Inman when back in the day. So that was talk about OLAP stuff. That was just for me, because I learned it so young. It was just like, oh, it's natural. It's obvious. You got hierarchies. You got ragged hierarchies. You've got facts. You've got measures. You've got attributes. But I think. Does that get taught? And I think it's a lost art. I think the big data era ruined it a little bit, where you just put all these things in JSON, stick it there.
It's all right here. I mean, all you need to do is just throw your data into any number of these things, and your life is totally solved, right? So,
what I always find is interesting, you bring up I'll just dump it in JSON. I feel like that's a very engineering move, and I feel like in my perspective, it's we're not building this thing for us to analyze. We're often building these for business users who have no idea how to okay, how do I deal with this JSON? How do I deal with this array? How do I deal with this data that's in a shape and not just from parsing it out. You can teach them how to parse it out, but okay, well now you're causing duplicates, and now you're causing these problems, and now you're causing. So we need it's all, I feel about us creating a layer that's very easy for them to be plug into Tableau, do your drag and drop, don't worry about too much in terms of the logic. So I think that's
exactly right, Ben. Exactly right.
Yeah. So, it's interesting though. I mean, I look at this list here, and it's kind of a crazy list. And when I start looking through it, I'm like, I actually, because I've been doing it long enough, I probably know a lot of these, but I wouldn't expect anyone to know a lot of these things or a fraction of them. This is a shit ton of stuff. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's quite a daunting task. If someone sees that you need to know this for your data, you're not going to get the people we need in this industry. It's hard to find people, and you need to break it down into. I'd be interested to see how many of those things are relevant if you use Snowflake. You don't need any of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, if I'm using some AWS version of Kafka or something, do I need to know all that? No, you don't. So if you whittle that away, you'll get down to the reality of you just need to want to solve a problem and build a pipeline. It's source to target with some transformation. That's it.
Yeah, it's kind of bananas.
I don't want to dumb it down that much.
But you see these kind of graphs though in data science, and I think this also leads data scientists astray. Data science is this, and they plop this gigantic graph on it, and it's 3 pages long, and it's if you don't know data science, you're a terrible human and aren't a data scientist, and you should just give up. It's almost a thought, but I think what we're talking about too is it's not. To me, data engineering is not a technology discussion. It's I hate to sound Zen-like, but it's a way of life, man. But it's kind of it's an approach to data. And the more I start digging into it, and I'm sure you guys are the same way. I'm just I actually don't know shit about as much as I should about this field. There's so much to know, and there's so much as your point now, Chris, these dark arts that are actually key underpinnings of data engineering, and it's at some point you're going to come across these things, and at some point you'll realize there's not a lot of new stuff. It's actually just cycles and
upcycled. Yeah, exactly. I did I do a lot of posts. I don't have as many followers as you, Joe. I did check you out. I'm not there yet, but I do quite a few posts, and I get inspired by things I see. So I was working out in the Alps. Well, I was living out in the Alps, working, got a few days skiing. It doesn't sound as glamorous as it was, but I was looking at things that have been done. Because there was no lifts running, people were they were doing split boards. So they were taking their boards, they were putting things on it, putting old school bindings on it. I'm thinking, you've just upcycled some old tech, in that way. and moved it forward. DBT, YAML, or what? Yeah, you've taken something good out of big data. You got some configuration. Yeah, you've taken something and you've gone, right, okay, now it's a great configuration for doing pipelines. We should look back on how things are done. Facts, dimensions. There a reason why we structure that. It makes it easy to consume. It's easy for people to understand. Relational databases, they've been around for a while because we think relationally. Something has cardinality between one and the other, and I think people start to lose sight of where things have come from, and that's changing. People are looking back and going, yeah, that's pretty cool. We should reuse that.
What are your thoughts, Ben?
No, I mean, like, I think that's always kind of what I mean, even when I'm telling people, like, if they want to learn data engineering, I'm always like, yeah, like, pick up Kimball's book first, just to see, like, where did we come from? Why did we become who we are today? Like, data engineering, like, again, like you brought up, like, ETL developers, there's like BI developers, there's like all these different components that have just built up this kind of monolithic view of like data. I also like to think of like when you're talking about like dark arts, I'm thinking about like Andre Kretz, just because he always goes there. You go. Well, you can just find it. You guys can just Google for free.
PDF.
Kimball.
You don't need to have a book like a savage.
There's literally a PDF online, but like so he always goes into his YouTube channel. He like goes into like stuff that's so specific and like into some things that I haven't even worked with that much. Like I've never had to deal with Flink. I know what it is. Have I used it? No. Like, why? Like, there's so many other options out there nowadays for me, for most of the things I need. So I think that it's always interesting, like seeing all these people who take different perspectives and different aspects of data engineering, all the different views that people have of what a data engineer is, everything from companies to people, right? Like everyone's like, oh, it's this is what a data engineer. It's all about like the analytics component. This is what data engineers. You have to do Hadoop and you have to do these things. And it's like, all right.
Oh God! Let me show you this article I found. Keep talking. I'm gonna.
Oh no!
It was hilarious.
It's the data scientists all reinvented. They're like, okay, they need to be able to do the math. They need to be able to prep the data. That person never existed as well. What everyone looked for, and that's the same thing's happening with data engineers as well. You want everything, and you need to see what you really need.
Yeah, no, it's a fun field to be in because there's just a lot of ways to answer the same problem, and I think I do hope we eventually kind of whittle it down. I'll be curious to see if either through hopefully a ending of so much crazy funding or something we could just start like picking stuff for the discipline. Okay, what's this article?
Let me see. 10 must skills have for data engineering jobs. So articles like this, right? These just drive me crazy. Like database tools. Let me see. Transformations like Kivo, Matillion, Talon, Pitaho. I don't even know what's your data. Like, what the fuck? Data ingestion, Storm, Flume, Scoop. I don't even know what anyone using Scoop. Away from it. Mahout. I haven't used Mahout in like fucking long ass time. So.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing you're not on YouTube. You just lost your AdSense.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, actually, I am.
Well, if you don't have AdSense, it's fine.
Okay. No, not yet. But yeah, so it's all these different technologies, which I'm like these Informatica. I think these types of suggestions lead budding data engineers astray. Is what my take on this, right? Yeah. So. Informatica is very expensive. Not to knock it. I'm saying if it's a good tool for you, great. But
it's okay.
I was just trying not to lose my AdSense. So
no. I was gonna say it's okay. They've made a ton of money off of Bitcoin recently, so they're fine.
Oh, that was MicroStrategy.
Oh, sorry, MicroStrategy. Wrong. Yeah. Different, similar thing. Yeah. Sorry.
MicroStrategy is still owned by some crazy dude, but unfortunately, Informatica was bought by a hedge fund, Permira, not that long ago. So they're a little bit more sensible with their money. I don't think you'll find them people investing in Bitcoin. But the guy that owns MicroStrategy,
No, it's just funny. Like when you that's what made I'm not saying MicroStrategy isn't relevant. There's obviously plenty of people that use it. I know people who still work on it. I know people who are developers on it. But I think a lot of people are like, what in the world is MicroStrategy? Again, like BI and data engineering in a weird way. It's like it's kind of growing, but it's such a niche field that so many people are like, what is this field? So to have this one thing that kind of is focused in that area is like who's MicroStrategy? What's this company?
They're
So
pretty big.
Oh, they were, no, for sure. But I think like
they're very much the BI space. Like Business Objects, Cognos, I mentioned earlier, and MicroStrategy were like they were the three mains, and then Tableau came along and sort of like dominated, and then Power BI gave. Well, Microsoft gave Power BI for free, so that got them the market share. A ThoughtSpot is something that we quite like as a visualization, and so taking that report writing to the next level. Bit of a plug there, but yeah, I do quite like that. They've got some great stuff on Formula One data. Easily visualize it. It's pretty cool presentation actually.
Well, you gave it. The thing is, you gave that for free, so it might be a plug, but you're not getting anything from it. So no, I think you brought up. I do think you brought up something. I don't remember if it was Joe or Chris earlier about where do you start? And it's like, I think that's why I made that one video where I like kind of try to talk about like the different places to start. It's like, well, just learn some I said coding, like Python, whatever kind of coding, some SQL, like that's kind of the base regardless, right? And then after that, you got to learn data warehousing and some more specifics. And then after that, you kind of got to do some DevOps, some data viz, whatever. And then after that, okay, specialize in something, sure. Like if you like Azure Data Factory, if you like, some other specific tool, you can specialize. But either way, you got to start with that base of like coding, SQL, understand data, and then go from there. Like don't worry about all this other streaming, batch processing. I didn't think about streaming and batch processing until I think the first maybe like the second or third year, and I was like, okay, now why would you do one or the other, right? Like you might not even have the chance to, or have the opportunity to ever work on a streaming system. Like I think it's becoming more prevalent, but overall, it's like you may never need that solution.
Yeah.
First thing, you need a business use case for it. You need a reason to do it, and then the journey's taken for you. Of what you focus on is what's adding value, or in your own time doing a bit of R&D. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool. I think we're running up on time. Chris, it was great to meet you. Love to just kind of gate crash and does a great job. So
I'm sorry. I did hold back on my comments. There was so much stuff that resonated with me as you were saying it.
That's awesome. I figured the more efficient thing would be just to bring you on versus just like respond to you in the chat. So. Awesome. And Ben, Seattle data guy, you want to give a quick shout out for all the stuff you're working on?
Sure. I mean, like if you're interested, you can just find me under the Seattle data guy, whether that's YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. Trying to put out some content around the whole data space. So if you're interested in learning more, that's the goal, is to really kind of condense it down and just have people kind of see it's like, hey, is this something you want to do? I think it really is like, look, if you're interested in data science, or if maybe you've heard about it and you're not completely sure if you're interested in it, maybe you're a data engineer in hiding. I don't know. I think that's what a lot of people again kind of come. They're like, oh, I like data science, and then they just shift more back to engineering.
Mm-hmm. That resonates with me too. I mean, I started a whole company around it just because my moniker is a recovering data scientist. I've been in data for longer than you probably think. I look young. I'm not. So, and it's one of those things where I think I gravitated to, because I realized data engineering is such a hard problem. I mean, my background is in machine learning, and it's just, until you have good data engineering, you're not going to have great machine learning. You won't really have machine learning at all, actually. So that was a realization for that. But I'm glad we're all talking about this. I think the space of data engineering, it's coming up. It's still really young. I think we have a lot of different perspectives, right? So it's like, I think it pays to have everyone talking about this and just, I guess answering questions and speaking to the masses. So appreciate you guys coming on. Well, happy to do it, again, pretty soon. So
yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
To the audience, thanks for the questions. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Take care. Bye. All right. See y'all.
Bye.
Cool. I think it's ended. So,
no, live says 5022.
I think
sure?
Good.
Oh, why does it still say live?
It says it's ending. I don't know. Anyway, and the broadcaster just ended it. End broadcast. I think we're stuck in an infinite loop. Okay. And the broadcaster control connecting.